let's take a look at this particular example right here. Lutheran company uses Plantwide predetermined overhead rate of 23.40 cents per direct labor hours. This predetermined rate was based on the cost formula that estimated, again, it's estimated before the period even started. We estimate the total manufacturing overhead cost is $257,400, and that's for estimated activity level of 11,000 direct labor hours. The company incurred actual total manufacturing overhead cost of $249,000 and 10,800 total direct labor hours during the period. So again, when you're doing your homework or doing your exam, you need to be very clear about what is considered estimated, what's considered actual. So estimated is prior to the beginning of the period. So before you even start the period, you already have these two numbers, and then you use these numbers to calculate your predetermined rate of 23.40. So this is your rate, or this is how you calculate that 23.40 here. So 23.40 here is calculated by use this formula right here, estimated. Okay. So in here, the estimated total manufacturing overhead cost for the incoming period is $257,400, and the estimated cost driver or allocation base is your direct labor hours, and the total units of direct labor hour being estimated for the incoming period is 11,000. So 257,400 divided by 11,000, you got 23.40. Okay, that's how we get that. If the rate is not given to you, then you should be able to calculate that rate based on this number right here, right? So you can verify that's the case. So you have 257,400 divided by 11,000, and that gave you 23.40. That's how they get that 23.40. Okay. On the other hand, these two numbers are actual number. Then you don't know this until the end of the period. So after you do all the job, now you actually spend this much money for this many labor hours. All right. So right now it's asking us how much has been applied to job order during the period. So it's not asking us how much overhead we actually spend. We already know we actually spend this much. But how many we applied? When you do the apply, you use this rate multiplied by the actual number of your allocation base. So we use the estimated number of allocation base to get this allocation rate. But once we have the rate, at the end of the year, we use this predetermined rate. Again, it's predetermined rate, okay? That's how you calculate that. Use this predetermined rate, multiply by the actual number of your allocation base. Then you will have this. So what do we have here? So we do that using the 23.4 multiply 10,800 actual allocation base. So that gave us 252,720. So 252,720. That's what we have. Okay. We can see if we got it correct. All right. We scored this and we got it right. All right. So the next question. This Mickey company's Plantwide. So we have this predetermined rate of $14 per direct labor hours, and the labor wage is $17 per hour. The following information pertain to the job A500. So we know the total manufacturing cost will be include the direct material and direct labor plus the overhead costs. So we'll see how much is the total cost. So we want to know we know the direct material for this job is like $231, and we know the direct labor is $153. However, what is manufacturing overhead cost applied? Well, in order to know how much applied, put a question mark here. In order to know how much, we know that needs to equal the predetermined overhead rate multiplied by the actual units of allocation base. So in this case, the allocation base is the direct labor hour. We know the rate. We know predetermined overhead rate equals to $14 per direct labor hour, right? But we don't know the labor hour. So what's the actual labor hour? So we don't know this second part of it. We do not know this portion. All right, so we need to find it out. Well, so it's pretty easy if you think about it. So we spent this much dollar on the direct labor hours, and we know the labor is $17 per hour. All right, so if it's $17 per hour, and we spend 150, so the number of hours, labor hours, equals to this 153 divided by $17, right? So we'll get 9 hours to get that, right? So if it's 9 hours, then we know here it should be equal $9 per hour. So $9 per hour multiplied by the rate of how much? 14, all right? So that's our total cost allocated to this job. So we'll just add a total here. If you add the 3 total together, then we should have the total cost for this job, 510. So total manufacturing job cost is 510 here, right? And then what's the unit cost then? Well, we just take that total number of costs here, and how many units did we produce? We said we produced 40 units. So you will take that. So the unit costs for job A 500 should equal to the total cost, which is 510 divided by 40 units. Okay, so that gave us what? You guys can do the number. That'll give you $12.75 per unit. All right, so put over here $12.75. Okay, let's score. Yes, we got all right. See, all right. Check out this one. This is very similar here. I asked for the total costs and then ask us for the unit costs. So we'll use the same formula there. But we got 2 different departments here. That's the thing. So we got 2 different departments. Early example only have 1 department. So we're going to make these disappear. We again. In this case, we know the predetermined rate for the finishing and fabrication is $18, so this is 18 instead of 14. Okay, per direct labor hours, and this 100% direct material cost for the fabrication. All right, so this is that. This is for your $18 per direct labor hours for the finishing. So right now you got 2 different departments. You have 2 different ways to allocating over costs. So, okay, and also the pre-overhead rate equals 110%, 110% of the direct material costs for the fabrication department. Okay, so we know that. So in here we have finishing, fabrication, so direct material here is 400 for 10, and for this 60. Direct labor 128. Here is 48. But we don't know how many. We don't know how many to allocate here and how many to allocate there. All right. We need to know that. So we know that for the finishing department it's $18. It's $18 per direct labor hours. But we don't know how many labor hours we actually had. So just like we had last time, we're just using the total labor cost, all right, which is 18. So the labor cost, so that will be equal. This is 128 for finishing department. That's the total labor cost divided by the labor rate we pay them. We pay them at $16 right here. So divided by 16, and they gave us 8 hours. So if it's 8 hours, and for each hour we apply to $18. So here should be equals 8 times 18. That gave us the overhead cost applied to the finishing department. And for the direct material, here is 110% of the direct material cost for fabrication. So it will be 110% times the direct material cost. So that's how much we're going to get there. So the total cost for the fabrication is this much, all right? And so this will be a total cost. Job that done in the fabrication, and this will be a total cost for the finishing department. So if you combine these two, so we'll combine these two. This one plus that one, it gave you $856. So this total cost is $856. All right. And then how many units in job 700? Well, we said 15. So 856 divided by 15, it gave us the unit cost of around what? Around $57, right? Give or take. So it says 2 decimal point. 2 decimal point for this one will be 2 decimal point will be 5707. 57.07. So that's what we're going to get. All right. So let's score, and we got all both answers correct. Move on to the next. So in this particular example, this company has job order costing system. It has a plan-wide determine overhead rate, use the direct labor hours as allocation base. So different from the question we just finished, over there you got two different predetermined allocation rates for two different departments. So finishing has finishing rates, and the fabrication has fabrication rate. In this particular example, instead of have different rate for different departments, we just have one rate across the entire plan. So we call plan-wide predetermined rates. Okay, and they only use direct labor hours as allocation base. So in this case, the company pays direct labor $15 per hour. During the year, the company started and completed only 2 jobs. Job Alpha, which used 54,500 direct labor hours, and job Omega, the job cost sheets for these 2 jobs as follow. So it kind of gave us numbers and asked us to going backwards to find out what is the number here. So it gave us the total cost. Earlier, the 2 examples we just went through, we know the information here, but we don't know the information here. So we were trying to figure out what's the total cost. But this one is reverse. So we know the total cost, but we don't have enough information here. So we need to working backwards to get the answer for those question marks. Before we start doing this, we need to figure out what is they ask us what's the allocation rate. So I'm going to clean up here. We don't need this. So here, how do we find out the rate? Again, how do we find out the rate, if you guys still remember? So the rate is equal to estimated total manufacturing cost divided by estimated total units in allocation base. So remember that. So what we have here then is we do have the total overhead cost allocated to omega. So we have the numerator. We have the numerator for job omega, but we don't have the denominator. We don't know how many hours was estimated. All right, so let's find that out. We know that the labor cost for omega is $3.45, right? And how much we pay per hour basis? We'll pay $15. So in that case, we know the direct labor hour used equal to this $3.45 divided by 15, okay, which is like 23,000. All right, so that's how many labor hours we used. Okay, so once we have this 23,000, and again using the formula over here to calculate the rate, we already know the top one, the numerator, is given to us at 184, and now we know the denominator, which is 23,000 here. So we put this. We have 184 on top and 23,000 on the bottom. Now we can get our calculation of the rate. Which is $8. So if you don't believe me, let's do the calculation. So the predetermined overhead rate will equal to $184,000, which is the total manufacturing overhead cost that I applied to the omega, right, divided by the 23,000 hours, which gave you the 8. Well, how do we say that? Because we know the cost applied to job omega equals to actual labor hours used for job omega multiplied by predetermined overhead rate, right? So mathematically, that's what it is. And then we know the cost applied to the omega is 184. That's how much it was applied, right? So this one. And then we also know the actual labor hours we calculated here is 23,000. So 23,000 hours, all right? And multiply by the pre-overhead rate, right? So you know that. This is a mathematical equation, then you should have no problem to solve, right? Basically, 184,000 equals 23,000 times predetermined rate. So the predetermined rate then equal to 184,000 divided by 23,000, which gives you the 8. So here is the 8. That's the answer. All right. So once we have the rate, we'll need to know how much cost we're going to apply to job alpha then. Well, we know for alpha, direct labor cost is equal to direct labor cost. We know how much it is equal to how much? We know that it's 54,500 direct labor hours, and if we pay them $15 per hour, then we know that. So that's equal to 54,500 times 15, that gave you like 817,500. Okay. So we're going to put here 17,500. Okay. And then let's find out the labor cost, the overhead costs applied. So manufacturing overhead costs applied. That's what, because we know is the application rate is $8. We already calculated that one. It's $8 here. So that equals $8 times how many labor hours? 54,500. That's labor hours we use for alpha. 54,500. All right. So that gave you $436,000. $436,000 on that one. All right. So then, only thing we don't know at this moment is the direct material cost. So what is the direct material cost? Well, some of you say, well, I don't know. I already got the direct labor. But yeah, of course you know, because the total of the direct material plus direct labor plus the overhead equal this 1,533,500. And you already have these two. So it's pretty easy for you to solve that one, right? So the total is 1,533,500, right? That's the total, right? And that equals to direct material cost plus direct labor cost plus the manufacturing overhead cost, all right? So we don't know this, so that's your question mark. That's your X, right? And you do know this, so this one is that. And you also know this one, so that one is this. So mathematically, your equation, so I'm going to write this equation right here. So basically 1,533,500 equal to X plus 817,500 plus 436. So that's a mathematical equation. So you're solving for X equal to this one minus that one minus that one. It gives you $280,000. So 280,000. So that's what we have. See, the total cost is exactly equal to that. So we know we did it right. All right. Hopefully, through this few examples, then you have a better understanding how to calculate the predetermined overhead rate, and then use the predetermined overhead rate applied to a particular job to find out the total cost for a particular job and the associated unit cost for that particular job. When you have more than one department, then you learn how to use department-specific allocation rate to find out the costs for a job that gone through 2 or 3 different departments. You calculate the cost and the overhead costs applied within each department separately, then you add them together. But when you're using the plan-wide predetermined rate, like we're doing here in this particular example, then you will just have one rate. You apply that for all different departments based on one base, and then add together, then you have a job costs. All right? Thank you.